Let's call the meeting to order. Appreciate everybody being here. We've had a busy summer. I hope everybody's enjoying the rain and things going on. So, let's. Do we have any citizen comments? Nope. Okay. All right. Let's take one thing out of order. What I guess they call order of the day. Councilwoman, is that what they call it when we take something out of order? Okay. I'd like to take out of order, since we put it off from the last time, just very quickly to look at, is under the action item, consideration to vote on a resolution of proposed letter to City Council regarding campaign to seek support of other boards of health across Texas regarding synthetic drugs. I've got the resolution here. Unfortunately, we apparently didn't get a copy of it, but if instead of going through all the whereas, let me just read the resolution and we can talk about it. Be it resolved that the Lubbock Board of Health recommends that the ability of law enforcement to take legal action against the vendors of these products, these synthetic drugs, is hampered by access to laboratory analysis that determines the chemical composition of submitted evidence. This limitation is related to the misdemeanor penalty presently assigned to possession of these chemicals and the lack of interest in said labs in possessing submitted substances. Therefore, it will be necessary to seek further legislative support to increase the penalty for said possession and distribution of these illegal substances to the level of a felony in order to gain access to laboratory analysis. And further, that the Board of Health for the City of Lubbock be empowered to distribute the attached letter, which it's, I'll go back, to distribute the attached letter to other boards of health across the state of Texas, asking for their support in gaining support across the state in a coordinated effort to undertake a campaign that communicates to legislators in Austin the importance of this action. And further, that additional names and departments be added to the list of signatures on the attached letter prior to distribution of said letter to be sent out within the next 60 days. In summary, what I'm asking here for is that we want to pass a resolution to go to council asking for them to vet and give permission for us to then contact other boards of health, saying that we would ask that they contact Becky, and then when they contact Becky, we're going to ask that and we've got a form letter basically that asks legislators to formally indicate that when the next legislative session meets, that they would support and vote for increasing the penalty for possession and distribution from a misdemeanor to a felony. Okay, does that make sense? Possession? Well, I put possession, but in this case, I would accept a revision that says for distribution. Yeah. Okay, and the reason is we found out in our work that labs won't test because it's not sufficiently bad enough. Right. And even though I suspect that there's no legislator in Austin that isn't going to vote for that, my concern is that it may get buried somewhere in that, and I would like them to, for example, in Lubbock, what we would do is we would write our two reps and state senator and say, would you please send a letter back acknowledging that you're going to support and vote for this? So it doesn't really change, I think, where we're headed. I just want a formal and a coordinated effort between the boards of health. And when we put it up to council, if you remember when we talked about it before, I can't remember if it was Councilwoman Joy or if it was Councilman Victor that said, there may want to be some other names added to a letter like that, so we act as a city to go contact other cities to do this. So, discussion.
I was going to offer another avenue, not necessarily. You still may want to do this, but every year prior to the legislative session, the council has the opportunity. There are several issues that are always brought forward to the council to put on their legislative agenda that they will, that our lobbyists and TML are then presented with in order to take forward on whether or not they want to adopt that. Now, if the council would not adopt it, then it would not go forward through that avenue. But I would assume the discussion would be very similar to the council about, whether they would like for the Board of Health to go forward with that, or they would adopt it and take it forward too. So just offering that up, I'm happy to do that, to put it on the agenda so that it can be discussed for the council to see if they want to adopt that on their agenda also.
Okay.
Is that like for Lubbock Day in Austin?
It's, well, not just for the day, but it's for their entire agenda of issues. There'll be water issues, there'll be...
For their lobbyist group.
Yes.
Lobbyist group.
That Yes.
I think that's a great idea, but I was also thinking if you're trying to get political momentum, like the Texas Police Chief Association, Texas Sheriff's Association, they're from all over the state, not major cities, see what their stance, what their organization's stance is. You know, just getting horsepower together like that make a big difference for. I don't think there's any legislator that would vote against it.
Right. Councilwoman, do you have any thoughts?
The Police Association has a very large lobby too. But Scott and I were talking about this earlier. The DA is approaching it through a different enforcement mechanism now, which does have some teeth in it. So we might want to kind of keep that in mind. If there is that going on, it doesn't mean that you can't continue to push the legislature to what we have now to put some teeth in it. But what ordinance we have right now is just non-enforceable.
Right.
Period. But the DA does have an avenue to enforce it. And Scott, what are they they're doing that under like some sort of false
Deceitful trade practice.
Yeah, trade practices. And that seems to have done more good in terms of enforcement.
Okay.
Can we go back and revisit the word possession?
Right.
That bothers me because, I mean, I'm against selling this stuff. What I worry about, if you get the word possession into the law and then you get a bunch of kids with some of this stuff and they all get hauled into jail,
So I would strike that to read, there's two instances where that shows up. This limitation is related to the misdemeanor penalty presently assigned to distribution of these chemicals. That would be the change. Mm-hmm. And then it'd be necessary to seek further legislative support to increase the penalty for said distribution of these illegal substances. So I'll remove possession entirely.
Thank you.
And do the other. And as I said, we present it to council to kind of, so it's not like we're not going to take the action. We just want to have the opportunity to present it to them for their thoughts further. Dr. Shakur?
But I'm a little naive and confused. Distributing or dispensing synthetic drugs is illegal, should be illegal. There should not be any controversy. Is there a controversy at any level?
No, not a controversy. It's just that the assignment is a misdemeanor.
It should be felony. I mean,
which is what we're asking the legislators. It's not a felony.
Oh my.
But this isn't a drug. It's just a hodgepodge of chemicals.
That is it. I mean, I don't know how you define. It is like a drug.
But it's not manufactured as a drug. It's manufactured
technically
as
it's not a drug,
incense.
I guess. It's,
right.
when you combine them, it is like a drug.
The effects are.
The effects are, so by definition, it doesn't qualify as a drug. Is that?
I think that's the technical difference. Is it sold as an air freshener?
Oh,
But if we can get them to test for it, because it's a felony charge and they test for it, then we're going to be able to find if it's got the substances in it which have been banned under the ordinances. It's just that we can't get them to test for the substances under the ordinance because it's a misdemeanor. So that's why we're seeking the felony level for distribution.
I'm fully supportive of that. You're right. It doesn't qualify under FDA criteria as a drug. Yeah, okay, I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is an action item. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor in advancing this resolution for consideration by council, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 up. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. We'll work on that, and then I'll, as that draft goes out, because we'll probably, let's see, City Council meets next week. Scott, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it'll be at least probably the one after that. So we'll
First meeting in August.
Okay, so we'll probably present at that point. So I'll distribute it, the final language, and just make sure everybody's. That's the only change that I see is removing possession and put in distribution.
Keep
All right.
in mind our hours have changed. The council meeting.
Yeah, 5:15, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, very good. All right, now let's get back in the regular order. I'm really delighted that we continue our discussion about water, and I see that we have two of our local experts here. I assume Aubrey's here to grade Dr. Rainwater on his presentation. I'm most pleased to introduce Dr. Ken Rainwater, who's the director of the Water Resource Center at Texas Tech University. He is busy in the field. When I reached him, he was next to a drilling rig, but he accepted our invitation to be here today and to tell us more about brackish water and other issues under his expertise. Good afternoon, sir. Go
I
ahead.
stepped on my shoestring. Maybe Aubrey did that as I was walking down. All right, I've been working in Tech since 1985 as a professor in civil and environmental engineering, been involved with our Water Resources Center and a bunch of folks at Texas Tech been on the board with Steve before. So we try to, we say we'll work for food, but we'll also work for water. So I'll tell you a story here. My co-author is my doctoral student, An Jabin Mabarga. He's from Cameroon. Leon Fasson is another faculty member in our department, an RO, reverse osmosis specialist, and John Schrader is the director of the National Wind Institute. The arrow is just next. Right there we go. Okay, well, why do we do this? I've been in West Texas for a long time, and I guess these thoughts started about 10 years ago. We look at our long-term municipal water supplies, as you've heard Aubrey and other people talk about. Our fresh Ogallala aquifer is depleting in places. There are some places it's going up, and most places it's going down. Currently, in most places, but not everywhere, the water is of good quality, and people in general pump and disinfect and distribute the water. But as you guys know, in 2007, the drinking water standard for arsenic dropped from 50 parts per billion to 10. And in fluoride, that number's moved around as long as I've been alive in terms of what's okay. And then there are other chemicals, selenium, naturally occurring radioactive materials, stuff like that, that are also detectable in some of our water supplies. And one of the things I like to say about arsenic is, the limit used to be 50, now it's 10. And as Steve knows, with the work they've done out at Thai, a lot of places around here have concentrations about 15. And so we have this really big audience here that has been exposed to arsenic for many years, and in many cases continue to be. And when I say if it only makes us talk slow about pickup trucks, is that so bad? But it's still something we have to deal with. It's the EPA's job to increase the list of things we're supposed to be afraid of for the public good. And as a civil engineer, that's job security for us. So, and also we want to protect the public as well. Beneath the Ogallala, we have what's called around here the Santa Rosa Aquifer. Officially, the geologists say the Dockland Formation and producing zone. It has different names in different places. I'm going to say Santa Rosa. Are there any geologists in the room? I'm good. All right. I love geologists. They're much more fun to be with than engineers. The water quality variations across it are estimated. We'll look at a map later so you can see this. Also, on the handout, I had to make it small because we only have so much color toner at home. But I provided to Brian the presentation. If you want to get close to the pictures yourself, you're welcome to do that. Water quality varies from place to place, and not many people have used the aquifer, so the local productivity is unknown. Whatever's going to happen is for people to keep providing water in many of our communities, it's going to take more wells, and they're going to have to treat it more, so there's no way they can get any cheaper. So that kind of gets us started. Okay, this is because of who you guys are. I went and found a couple of things on the internet that I haven't properly cited, so please don't turn me in. Just trying to give you kind of a general idea about some of the big picture things with desalination to begin. At the top, people take, I guess we're supposed to say desalination. Some people say desalinization and all sorts of other things. We're in West Texas in approximate pronunciation anyway, so I don't really care. But typically we have a separation, unintended, between membrane-based approaches and thermal approaches. And the membrane-based approaches are on the right-hand side in the upper part of the figure, and so you're used to hearing about things like reverse osmosis and electrodialysis. Essentially, we try to have the water molecules with these dissolved material in them meet the membrane. Only the water molecules can come through, and the stuff we're trying to remove stay on the other side for one reason or another. The single-phase membrane processes are useful for brackish water and for some seawater approaches. In addition, that electrodialysis is listed there. That's what they're putting in at Wolford as we speak. Doug Hutchison would love to talk to you about that. They're very pleased with what's going on out there. On the other hand, if you have a lot of heat available, more power, there are the thermal processes where you essentially distill water. You start with the water with the stuff in it, you heat it up, you get a vapor to come off, you take that vapor that's pure water somewhere else, and you turn that into the water that you're going to use. And there's different names for it: multi-stage flash, multi-effect distillation, vapor compression, but in all cases you have a vapor that you're making. That tends to be for seawater and worse. or the thermal processes. For the membrane processes, for example, just to kind of throw this number out there, the answer to most of the questions you're going to have today is going to be that depends, but you're used to saying that too. For example, the brackish water we're treating in Seminole, we get about 75% of the water back as the treated permeate water. So that's our recovery. If you're treating seawater under normal conditions with reverse osmosis, you get about 50% of the water back. So you still have 50% waste. When you end up with the thermal approaches, sometimes we're talking 10, 20, 30% good water as opposed to 70% bad based on what you're dealing with. Then I have a couple of these figures. This one in the blue there is again for you different medical people and scientists there talking about the different things that are removed in different processes. Aubrey, I believe, mentioned to you last week that there is ultrafiltration and microfiltration at the new South Water Treatment Plant, which I got to see a couple of weeks ago. That's really cool. Y'all should go if you haven't been. And it talks about what's separated in each place. So the black arrows show you what's removed in micro, ultra, filtration, nanofiltration, reverse osmosis. And they're all membrane-based situations, just the membranes have different sizes of holes. And there may be different things pushing them through. Now, if you wanted to connect it to stuff that you think about, that's what this picture is intended to be in terms of what happens in different membrane processes. At the bottom, we talk about here's microfiltration for this range from 0.1 microns to 10. Ultrafiltration here, 0.1 or less. Nanofiltration overlaps down here with reverse osmosis. Down getting more than 1,000 of a micron. So those are the sizes. And then you can connect these with different things. For example, suspended particles. For example, that's Lake Allen Henry. That's surface water, so it has sediments, things like that. That's part of what's removed there. Bacteria could be a little smaller. You guys hear a lot about viruses. We can talk about colloids, proteins, sugars. And then we get to the dissolved salts and metal ions over here. So that's just kind of meant for your general reference there in terms of maybe things you're used to talking about. Okay, back to our situation. Opportunities that we had to think about in this area, and you guys have watched it. Do you remember when we didn't have wind turbines? Can you even remember that anymore? Okay, but I should maybe ask, do any of you have one? I don't have one yet, but I'll let you see. We have renewable wind energy for electricity. Reverse osmosis for desalination is an opportunity for us to deal with some of our water issues, but if you're going to use it, a third to half of what you spend on desalination, on reverse osmosis, is electricity. So that's part of what you're going to pay. You also have to pump the water from the wells, and then after you treat the water, you have to move it around. So there's pumps and electricity there. You can think about that we actually store the energy in the produced water. Perhaps we could displace the grid power that we pay for with locally produced wind energy, and if you own the wind turbines, you feel the electricity cost differently. Now, we're not exactly in a place where you can sell, back when I made the slide, the hope is we could sell the excess, that net metering thing. But at least if you buy less from the grid, maybe, like I said, you'll feel it different depending on how you amortize your cost of the energy generation. The other thing that we have a lot of interest in is improving the energy efficiency for small capacity RO systems. The big systems like in El Paso, places like that, Tampa, are designed for certain economies of scale and certain operations. We have a lot of towns with smaller populations we'll talk about that need help as well. Oops, I thought I pushed the button. Okay, so our general research objectives, we did a market analysis of potential customers for wind power and desalination here. And we wanted to evaluate some of the issues related to intermittent wind RO operation and water storage, and then we were curious about the Santa Rosa productivity. We won't talk about all those things today, but that was kind of a general thing. In order to get this kind of work done, we don't work for free at Texas Tech. Well, we do sometimes, but don't really tell anybody. But to make things like this happen, we had to bring funds together. We had some funds from the Department of Energy and the Bureau of Reclamation. Texas Water Development Board was also very helpful. The State Energy Conservation Office. It used to be the Texas Department of Rural Affairs, then it became the Office of Rural Community Affairs, and now it's the Texas Department of Agriculture is the big community grant, and then of course as you'll see the city of Seminole, where it's still okay to be the Indian. Okay, when we surveyed a bunch of the water quality information from a bunch of cities in our part of Texas, essentially the southern high plains, and including on the other side of the New Mexico border, we just went to the, now you can do this on the internet, but when we did this, you had to go to the TCQ office to get the files and read them. And so for each of the cities, we identified within their well fields what was the worst well they had. So in terms of, did they have any exceedances relative to drinking water standards enforceable by the TCEQ? And so out of the 40 cities, 33 of them had exceedances for total dissolved solids. That's just everything added up. That's where we used to be with the old Lake Meredith water. Fluoride, those of us that grew up in West Texas know how to smile with their mouth shut, and we remember that. Arsenic, there were exceedances, 24 of them. Sulfate, 14. You've heard people talk about jippy water as you get close to the edge of the cap rock, stuff like that. Fluoride, a lot of places. Nitrate was kind of unexpected, but it does occur naturally in some places, and there's some places where somebody caused it. We won't look at anybody. The naturally occurring iron and radioactive material, gross alpha, is one of the expressions of radioactive stuff. So with that, 39 of the 40 cities in their current water supply, which mostly was from the Ogallala, had exceedances. So they're already in a position where they were going to have to do something. Back when we started this, they were just kind of hiding and watching. Now you can talk to Doug Hutchison and other folks. Now all these people have gotten letters from the EPA, Region 6, telling them you have to do something about it. And oh, by the way, it's not just municipalities. Anybody with a community water system that's permitted by the state is in the same boat. So there's a lot of challenges there. There are a few places where people already use the Santa Rosa water. We'll point those out in a little while. Currently, most of these cities only provide disinfection, and were required to do that back in the early 90s, I think, is that Charlie? And more complex treatment is going to have to happen eventually, and also their well field depletion, for some of them, impacts their future supply. Back when we started this, the concept was called community wind, where a municipality would either encourage the development with a third party or buy them themselves to own wind turbines of various sizes to assist in the cost of desalination and other electrical needs like pumping the water around. And this picture came out kind of small in your handout, but you can go, if you want to look at the PDF, you can read it. Essentially, originally, what people were dealing with is the blue stuff here. So you would have your source of your water, and we have this, you guys have jargon, don't you? Do I use the word potable? Mm-hmm. To me, that sounds too much like potty training. My kids are in their 20s now. I don't think about that anymore. That's the source for drinking water. We pump that. It comes to some perhaps sort of treatment, and so the treatment is, we just call it post-treatment in this picture because it was just disinfection. Previously, another pump to storage, and then it goes to the distribution system, which has more pumps in it. So that's the blue stuff. If you want to add brackish water that you're going to have to do some sort of desalination to, you'd have to pump that. You'd probably store it somewhere. You'd probably have to pre-treat it before it goes to the RO, because the RO membranes don't like stuff that's not dissolved. And then we have a chance that permeate, the good water goes into the system, and then we can use it. A big deal with this is that we're going to generate what we call the concentrate. Here it's not a verb, it's a noun, and that's essentially, we have, the water starts off at a overall concentration of total dissolved solids, say it's like 10,000 parts per million, something like that. Okay, after we go through RO, the permeate comes out with pretty close to 0. It might be 10 to 100, something like that. But all those molecules we took out of that water have to go in the other water. So say we got 80% recovery. So we have 80% good water and then 20% bad water. Well, all that 100% of stuff that was in the original water is now in that 20%. So it's 5 times as concentrated as it was before. So that's why it's called a concentrate. And there are different approaches for dealing with that. Evaporation in solar ponds, that sounds easier than it is, but it also is a chance to generate some electricity. Thermal conversions, disposal wells, we know a lot about here. The Water Development Board has encouraged that we inject this into disposal wells. The other thing is shown up here is the combinations of electricity that can be used to help with everything that's plugged in. Okay, getting back to this, I guess one of the reasons people still talk to me out here is I can actually spell and say Ogallala 4 out of 5 times. So that's, you know, people can't, right? Yeah. So it's our primary water source, and we want to remind ourselves that we're not, this is not a blame thing, this is just the way it is. You know, the Southern High Plains of Texas 95% of the groundwater use is for agriculture. It's not evil, it's just the way it is. Municipalities are in that other 5%. It provides at least part of the supply for all municipalities in the southern high plains. Some share a little bit of surface water. We're one of those, but others don't. The depletion's been noted for several decades. The water quality varies within the Ogallala. The further north you go, the better it is. As you go further south, actually the Ogallala is brackish as you get past Lamesa for sure. Santa Rosa is this lower Dockham formation. It has high total dissolved solids. Look at the map, and we don't know how much we can pump out of it. And just to let you know, if you're curious about the future of the Ogallala, I really want to send you to this website, or you can just Google Center for Geospatial Technologies. You can have to say Texas Tech, and it'll come up. Kevin Mulligan and Lucia Barbado and their staff have put together some wonderful maps about history, recent history of the Ogallala, and then what the future is. And this map here is one that's called the Estimated Usable Aquifer Lifetime. How long will it take until the saturated thickness in the aquifer gets down to 30 feet at different locations, because that means we probably can't pump it anymore. And so this is a map that shows that the areas that are already the light color, that are hatched, they were already less than 30 feet. People aren't pumping any water there anyway, and maybe never have. The places where we are the darker brown and the next brown next to it, those are places that are going to be below 30 feet within 15 to 30 years of, oh yeah, this data started in 2004. So it's just a reminder, this is just based on extrapolating what we saw from 1990 to 2004. So the Ogallala's future is like that. Oops, did I go backwards? There we go. Yeah, I had two of the same slide. Okay, now this is a map from essentially from the Texas Water Development Board that describes the footprint of the Dockham Aquifer, the Dockham Formation, where the water is in it in our part of Texas. So you guys are all familiar. Here's the Texas boundary, and here's Lubbock right there. And so this lays across the state line. The colors that you see on the map are associated with the levels of total dissolved solids. The lightest colors are less than 1,000 parts per million, which is okay for us out here. Now, the EPA wants it to be less than 500, but that's good for us. And if you can see on the map, there's a lot more wells in those places. The darker colors, especially get to what we have here in Lubbock, is that the concentration of total dissolved solids is greater than 20,000 milligrams per liter. So we're on our way to seawater, which is like 36,000 typically. So there's a big variation in the water quality. Down here, some of it's useful. Up here, you have friends in Tulia, Hereford, places like that. They use the Dockham for their current water supply. The place we're going to end up here for a while is in Gaines County. All right, the demonstration side. We did some workshops between the Water Resources Center and the Wind Institute several years ago, and out of that, the city of Seminole, some of y'all may know Mike Carter, who's one of the previous mayors, Carter Irrigation. If you drive around High Plains, you'll see their stuff. They approached us about being early adopters, or at least doing a demonstration of this. They already knew that their Ogallala well field would be depleting within 25 years, so they're going to have to go somewhere else and do something else. And they already had arsenic, fluoride, and PDS exceedances. They didn't necessarily want to build their own treatment plant. So they were interested, or if they were going to build it, what should they build on? They're going to run out of water. So what other water do they have? Because they're in the middle of the oil patch. They're not afraid of deep wells, especially Mr. Carter being an irrigation guy. So they were curious, and also they really weren't worried about the concentrate disposal, because they'd seen disposal wells for oil, many in their counties, so they were interested. So just to go back and show you, I don't know if all of you have ever been to Seminole. You don't really have to have that good a reason, I guess, but if you're going to go to Odessa, that's one way to go. And so Seminole's kind of toward the center of Gaines County, and it's in this area where the water quality in the Dockham was estimated to possibly be below 5,000 parts per million. Okay, and then this is let's use one of the all of Google Earth, right? You used to have to pay thousands of dollars for this information. And now, probably get me fired for wandering around too much. But it says proposed, we got married, this is where our well is. Here here on the south side of town. So here's the urban footprint of Seminole. Here's some center pivot areas. You can see we're in a former urban area. There's an airport here, which affects this a little bit. You guys all know what it is when you see these nice little patterns of white on an aerial photo in the oil patch. Right. Bunch of pump jacks.
Yep.
So just let you know about the kind of area we're in. Okay, let's go past halfway here. In terms of the brackish water, to get our Santa Rosa well, the deeper a well is, the more it costs. How about that? And then if you're drilling somewhere and deeper than you have before, the more it costs. And yeah, so we were able to complete the well with funding from Texas Water Development Board and TDRA. For the purpose of our project, we only needed 50 gallons a minute. We just wanted to prove that we could tie different parts of the system together. Essentially, we're going to have a well, we're going to have a wind turbine, we're going to have an RO system. And so we didn't have to really stress the aquifer too much, but also we didn't know if we could even do that. So there was a lot of time spent on our knees praying before that. Local Parkville Smith & Cooper was very helpful to us getting the well permit completed and procurement. That's a big deal. Sears Associates out of Dallas. Some of you all may have met Dr. Judy Reeves when she was here for many years in Lubbock. Helped us with well logging and geophysical analysis. And the West Texas Water Well Service out of Midland drilled and logged the well in 2011. The well totaled 1,800 feet deep. We screened, based on the geophysical analysis, we screened the bottom 150 feet, right above the 1,800. Then we screened it about 50 or 60 feet, around 900 feet. And then another 80 or 90 feet, around 600 feet, based on where it looked like it might produce. The original depth of water in the well, the total depth of the well was 1,800. The depth of water was 750. We had water. Praise the Lord. So we could move on. We all bought lottery tickets after that. A pump test, for 36 hours, it would give us 150 gallons a minute, a lot more than we needed, so we felt very blessed for that. And the well cost $450,000, which was only 50% more than the original test. Okay, just to prove water came out, and then that's Charles George from the local water district there taking a water sample. The first water quality analysis we did, we have 3 producing zones in there, so they all mix potentially in the well, and we didn't have the money to test it more specifically and separate the zones. But just in terms of the water, we've been talking about different things. The fluoride was below 2.5, so that's okay. This analysis didn't include arsenic. You'll see that later. The total dissolved solid from that first sample was 2,300. And so that could easily be handled by our RO, but as we'll see later, as we pump the well harder, we get different concentrations, but we can still handle. We had a surprise. Y'all ever have surprises in your work? Especially when you're trying to do a research project, you want it to go a certain way. Well, we had a good one. The static water level in the well rose over the next several months after it was drilled. It used to be 750 feet to the water, and over time it rose to within 100 feet of the surface, which that's good in terms of how the aquifer is behaving, but it was a challenge because our pump was sized for the other conditions, for the water level being lower, and so Aubrey would know that causes more intake pressure and you have to change your operating conditions. So we did. Also, as we're pumping, the water quality showed mixing of different waters from the Santa Rosa. It looked like the stuff at the top had a TDS of about 2,000, and then when we were pumping, sometimes we had a downhole sensor for salinity. Sometimes the water quality would change coming into the well where it would get as high as 30,000 in total dissolved solid. So there appears to be a gradation in terms of quality for the different producing zones. We did have no leakage from the shallower Ogallala. That's a big deal when you do wells of any kind. You don't want to have the upper formations leaking down. And so we used a variable frequency drive on our pump and changed our plumbing and things were better. Okay, here's our RO system. If you've ever seen pictures of RO systems, they tend to look like this, some sort of metal cage with these long white pipes that have the membranes inside them. And so that's what these 3 membranes are here. It goes through this one first and then these 2. And the water kind of comes in the side and then comes out these things and those 2 pipes, and we have the inflow capacity is about 40, 50, 60 gallons a minute. You have some looseness with that. The target TDS it was designed for was 7,000 parts per million, but it can go a little further. We do have treatment to reduce fouling. We have essentially cartridge filters that Essentially, we do produce some sediment from the aquifers we pump, and that has to be dealt with. And the concentrate goes to the sanitary sewer. The city did not want to spend the money to go ahead and get this approved to go have this water go into their system yet. So it's just a demonstration project. And we gave the opportunity to take the permeate and sell it for a non-potable use. They really didn't want to do that. So we were just piped to the sanitary sewer. So essentially what we do is we produce the brackish water, we treat it, we make some permeate, we make about 40 gallons a minute of that. We make some concentrate, about 14 gallons a minute of that. Prove that we did it, and we put it back together, it goes in the sewer. And the flow rate is small enough that the city sewer doesn't, wastewater treatment plant doesn't feel it. We use our DOE funds through Texas Tech for that. We bought it from a company in Florida for $90,000, and we started operating it some of the time in April 2012, and mostly done it the past year. Okay, so we have a small wind turbine. It's only a 50 kilowatt one. It's 100 feet to the hub nacelle there. It's at the top of the tip there. It's about 127 feet. And actually being close to the Seminole Airport, which I have rarely seen any planes going in and out of, it did affect where we put it. Site engineering was offered by the vendor. And the way it's wired is, we can run the RO system continuously. Either the grid provides the energy or the wind turbine. The wind turbine just displaces it. We bought that with money that we got from the State Energy Conservation Office and the TDRA funds. Actually, the wind turbine was supposed to have been donated before. There was another surprise. The company that was going to donate it, Integrity Wind, everything was great. We got a really good deal, and they just happened to go bankrupt right before we were going to have it. So they needed some cash, so we had to come up with it. So the turbine has been online most of the time since 2013. The typical output can be about 20 kilowatts, and our total demand when everything's running is about 17, so it's pretty good size. In operation duration, our idea was to try to run it for about a year. We're about going to finish that here in August. See what sort of production rates we get, how does the water quality look for what we produce from the well and what we produce from the treatment system, and what's our energy consumption, and then we report that to the city and the funding agencies. Now, after we've been running it for a while, some of the other analyses, these are a little bit more involved. This is the feed water here. That's the water from the well. And here's the total dissolves this time. When everything's running, the mixed water is as high as 8,000 parts per million, sometimes a little bit more than that. You'll notice where it says arsenic, we don't have any detectable arsenic in the document. It's got lots of other stuff under that. And the fluoride there is less than 5. They can't see it real. The detection limit goes up and the salinity goes up. I guess for the permeate though, for example, typically we have 8,000 going in and about 400 coming out. Yeah?
How could your iron go up?
That's a good question. It is what it is. RO doesn't take everything out. There are certain things that are based on the molecular form they're in, whether they're a cation or an anion, or they're oxidized or they're not, that can make it through the membrane. So it's not, this is not the RO water. I oversimplified it a while ago when I talked about thinking about it having nothing. It does have something in it. So it's interesting about the iron.
But even if you took it all out, you couldn't get that number.
Yeah, well, I think the iron just went through.
Yeah, but even if it all went through in your smaller volume, the volume's not that much smaller, is it?
Oh, well, I'm not really sure that difference is really a difference based on the error bars and how we measure these quantities. But I would like them to have been more different. The operational challenges, when you do real projects, especially if they're 80 miles away from your office and you're running out of money, this is what happens. So in June 2013, after we started, the well pump motor burned up for some reason we don't know. So we had to remove that and replace that. That was not budgeted for, but we had to get that done. Then it didn't hit us, but this is West Texas. There was a nearby lightning strike in August 2013, just when everything was running great. We got the well motor back up, and that essentially affected all of our electrical controls, and we had multiple maintenance visits from different people to get it to work again. Varying levels of success, and my therapy won't let me talk about that anymore. The membranes, if you operate the system properly, the membrane should last several years. And it turned out the city of Seminole hired a fellow that they trained, that it was going to be the big part of his job was to run this system. But a few months after they hired him, he left to work for somebody else. And so the city essentially has been taking care of this as best they could with limited, just spreading their staff thinner. And so they couldn't quite keep up with it the way that we would have liked. But then that's part of our research too, is when you have to do something more complicated, can the municipality handle it themselves, or is it an opportunity for a third-party service to come in? And I think that's really one of our major findings. Membranes were found, we replaced them in January 2014, and yes, you can autopsy them. Apparently you can't bring them back to life, but you can autopsy them. And then we've done a lot of manipulation of different settings. So the conclusions, the conceptual work for this began back in 2005, a long time ago, with the desire to help the small municipalities, and I think y'all kind of have the same thought. You're trying to look ahead and think about municipal interests for the long time. Federal and state agencies want to help. I guess that's a big difference for the small towns versus the big one. As Aubrey has talked to you about, there's a very different financial approach for the city of Lubbock based on how money comes and goes and their ability to borrow versus what they want to do. A lot of the smaller municipalities want to do things through grants. Some of them are very afraid of debt. And go into, especially in the oil patch, if you're just driving around, you see all this stuff and think, man, these guys must have a lot of money. But a typical thing in our Texas oil patch is, just based on the way the taxes work, is that probably the county has money, and probably the school district has money, but who knows about the city? Because of the way the taxes are shared and who does which responsibilities. So that's different. And we're connecting technologies that already work in and of themselves, but getting them all to work continuously is a big challenge. Another thing, we dealt with the consultants, us researchers. I'm a licensed engineer, but so is Aubrey, and he knows a whole lot more about how to get something built than I do. And so that's why we went to Parkhill, Smith & Cooper, and others to work with that. I think we did that. And like I already mentioned, there's some potential for vendors and maintenance businesses. So that's the story for this project. It kind of connects to what you're talking about, but I hope you see that we had to deal with unknowns for this location in order to make this thing work as it has. And that's where we stand today with that. Yeah.
What's and I may have missed it, but what was your comparison or as to the quality of the water in the Santa Rosa versus seawater? Is there?
Okay, sure. The Santa Rosa has about less than a fourth of the total dissolved solid in seawater.
Okay.
The seawater is about 36,000. It's kind of the rule of thumb number people say. And the mixed water that we're sending through the system is typically about 8,000. Now that lowest water, based on what we saw when we have the pumping fluctuations, could be getting close to seawater. And if their geologist would say, yeah, of course it is, because it's like an old ocean that's trapped down there. Yeah, within the sediments there. Yeah.
And you stir it up when you pump it.
You sure do. You cause drawdown in that well, and that causes fluctuations in that well too. Yeah.
Any thoughts on why the water level went up, or is it still up?
It's just showing us that the aquifer is under pressure. You know, when you get, the deeper you get, you might have heard this term. Okay, we have let's slow it. Okay, the Ogallala aquifer is the first one we hit where we are. And for example, here in the Seminole area, the depth of the bottom of the Ogallala is about 300 feet. And so you drill down to it, you hit the water table, where you start to be saturated, and you go to the bottom, which is actually the top of the Docklands, and that's called the red bed. And so that water that's in the Ogallala is what we call unconfined. There's no geologic layer trapping it and pushing it to put it under pressure. Okay, once we get into the Dockland formation, that's most of what the drillers call is the red beds. And it's mostly clay with some layers of sandstone where the water is. And so in that sandstone where the water is, it's like, say you have a balloon filled with air, and that's trapped all the way around, and you push on the balloon and it's under pressure, and you kind of move the balloon around, and if you push down, it would want to come up, for example. So trapped in that sandstone is, that water is called a confined aquifer. And so it's being pushed down by everything up above it, and that's called overburden. And so the deeper you get in subsurface, you have a chance, if there's enough water, that you can see that pressure relieved by how high it comes up in a well. The happiest people are the ones who get what's called an artesian well, where it pushes it all the way to the surface. They use the same concept in the oil and gas business too, and they're a few miles deep. And some of those things, they just got to get out of the way. You've all seen the movies. But then also they have, what's it called, the artificial lift when they have to pump it. That's the word they use, I think. So for groundwater, we always have to do. But for them, it's like a big, it's something. It's a cost, I guess, for them. So that's just a natural process.
Other questions?
Yeah.
No, just saying. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sorry.
Very good. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, we just kind of quickly, let's move on, but hopefully you stick around a little bit.
Sure.
Other people can ask you questions in there. All right. Would like to then take the opportunity here to introduce Teresa Bird, who is Associate Dean and Chair, Department of Public Health at our Texas Tech Health Science Center. So we're glad to have you here and give you some time up there to tell us what you're doing.
Yes, what I wanted to do was to meet you all because I'm a new public health professional in this community. I came here in December and I was freezing. It was really, really cold. They keep telling me that's not going to keep happening, that it's not always that cold. Is that true?
Wonderfully afternoon.
Yeah. It was just really cold this winter. I moved up here in December, and I am interested to hear about water because I decided since I was going to change my life dramatically, I would just go all the way, and I bought land, and I have an old farmhouse out in Hockley County where I use well water. I've never used well. I've been a city girl my whole life, so I've never used well water. I've never had a septic system, and it's been a lot of fun. The first day I was here, my well pump froze. That was fascinating. And I was thinking, and I didn't know this, but my furnace system runs on water. It's like a steam heating system, so then I didn't have water and I didn't have heat. It was like 9 degrees outside, so that was fun. But I called the well guy and I discovered how well pumps work. He showed me, he took his blowtorch and got it, showed me how it works. So now I have a little understanding of wells. And so that's been kind of interesting. So I'm learning some new public health stuff and being out in the country. I came from El Paso. I've been in El Paso for 20 years. I worked for the University of Texas School of Public Health in Houston. We had a regional campus in El Paso. So I did my doctorate in Houston, but as soon as I graduated, I went to work in El Paso, so I was there for 20 years. And then I went to work for the Paul L. Foster School of Medicine, which is part of the Texas Tech system. And we started talking about the need for a public health program in this part of Texas because all the public health schools are not in this part of Texas. And so I was really excited to come up here and start this program. And we're going to have our first class of MPH students, Masters in Public Health students. They're starting August 20th. We'll have a class of about 20. And we're hoping to grow this into a school of public health. And it's my goal. There are 3 other schools of public health, if you don't know that, in Texas. There's UNT, UT Houston, and A&M. And my expectation is to make this the #1 school of public health in Texas. So that's the goal, and we're working real hard to make that happen. So what I want to do is just meet the Board of Health. You guys will be important to us, to our students. I'm hoping our students can sometimes attend your meetings so that they can hear what's going on in the community and understand the issues here. I'm still learning about the issues in this part of Texas. I came from the U.S.-Mexico border where, we have tons of issues. But I'm learning about the issues of rural communities, which are fascinating. And I'm kind of happy I chose to live in a rural community. I've gotten to know my neighbors who are like a mile that way, and learning about the farming industry here, and that's been really fascinating. So I've already learned a lot, and I'm excited to be here, and just really wanted to meet you and let you guys know what's going on, so that you can kind of follow the progression of this project. So, do y'all have any questions about the school or that?